Hi, I'm Jim Miret. I'm the head coach of the Front Range Volleyball Club in Englewood, Colorado. And I'm here with you today to talk about some ideas about attack training, some ways to help your players learn how to develop and master some of the more difficult moves that there are in attacking. I'm a big believer in the idea that practice makes permanent. So what our players practice on a daily basis will become permanent parts of their game. So we need to make sure that they are doing mechanically the things that are the most effective, especially when it comes to the skill of attacking. So one of the devices that we're using here is a little cuff. We can put this cuff right below the elbow or right around the wrist, depending on what we're keen on with the swing mechanic. And this was developed by a gentleman with a company called PC360, and it's a great hitting aid, we feel, because where we can position this can really help the player feel some of the important elements of attacking. In this case, we put it above the elbow to help with the correct setup position. All right, we've got a couple players here to help us with our attacking practice today. We have Elizabeth Campbell and Janae Hall, and they're players on the Front Range 18-1 team this year. So the first move we're taking through our players right here is just a little attacking sequence movement here, and they're both in a elbow cuff, which if you want more information on this training aid, you can email me through the VTS website. But this is a training aid that I really like because it helps the player get in a good setup position here. And then right now Elizabeth's working on setting up and then rotating her hip first, and then letting her arm, letting her torso rotate, and then her arm comes last. So we're going to do like 7 or 8 reps of this each. We just have a little light resistance back here, and we're working on taking a setup position and then slowly going through the motion that we want the players to use when they're in the air, which is using their body to swing with, and their arm is kind of the last piece of the swing. So once again, just kind of warming up with this move here. 7 or 8 swings. Let's switch again. This time when you do it, let's pick up the free leg and let's get in that power C position. So one of the things that we notice with high-level attackers is when they're in the air, they get in what we're calling a power C position, where both heels slightly come up as the body rotates back to load. So we like to replicate this on the ground a little bit to get the players a feel for it. So as the player's loading her upper body, the heel, at least one heel here on the ground, slightly comes up. We create this power C position and then kick out of it as we're rotating our hips, and then our torso follows and our arm follows that. One of the difficult things about attacking, I think, is how many muscles are involved in the attack motion, and to synchronize these muscles correctly takes a lot of practice and a lot of time. And here we're just trying to help the players kind of feel the position that they're going to be, that they're going to use when they're in the air. So in this next step here, we're still using the cuff here above the elbow. The player now is going to go through her approach, and now she's going to work on one of the harder elements, I think, to teach young attackers, and that is the setup of her arm after she's left the ground to jump. One of the more difficult things about our sport and the attacking move is that we have to synchronize this move in the air. And of course, none of us are in the air very often. We're not in the air very long, so it's a foreign state for us. And to really swing and use our whole body requires a multitude of muscles, and to put them in the right sequence, we have to get our players in the air, but we got to get them in the air using the muscles in the right sequence. So here the players are working on trying to pull up on the jump. We've got a little bit of light resistance using this elbow cuff that's going to help their right hand from going above their head, but actually get it back into a productive setup position. And then we're trying to rotate the hip and then let the hip go around, followed by the torso, and then the arm comes last. I think that one of the things that makes attacking very difficult to train from a mechanical standpoint is that we're trying to get players to max jump at the same time set up to swing. And if I were to ask anybody to max jump, they would max jump by pulling both hands up over their head. Well, that's not the best mechanical position, we believe, for attacking. So we've got to simultaneously have them max jump and at the same time set up with their attacking hand down. So see, that's too high. Make sure you set up your elbow a little bit lower. That's better. So I like this device because it helps give the player direct feedback as to what her arm's doing while she's in the air, while she's trying to sequence the attack. All right. In this next sequence here, we're going to be using a little flat top Bosu ball. Go ahead. And our players are going to set up here, and we're going to set up in something similar to what's going to be our takeoff position. It's not exactly our takeoff position, but it's close to our takeoff position with our feet. I want to make sure that my players have got their knees slightly rotated out, which is a very good squat position here and good place for their knees. And we're going to return to this position on the landing too. And from here, I want my player to load first, now get their hands behind her back. She's going to pick her feet up, jump. She's going to go off the Bosu ball, set up, land, and she's going to stick her landing. Again, we're looking for those knees to be slightly out because knees caving in can be a very bad position and can cause a lot of injury. So we're keying on that right now. Knees out on the squat. Use the Bosu balls like a mini trampoline and then stick the landing. We're not swinging in this one. All we're going to do is set up and land. Very good. Because right now I'm keying more on how we're going to leave the ground and how we're going to land. And again, like we talked about earlier, I think it's difficult for players to pull up into the jump and set up. So we're going to get some reps at that. A lot of female players especially have a tendency to let their knees drop in or dive in when they take off and or when they land. So we want to start off in a good squatted position, get those knees pushed out slightly, take off in that position, and then land in that same position. Good. So now we're going to go, next step, go ahead, Jay. We're going to start off the same way. And I should also mention here that we've got a little landing pad here. This flat top Bosu ball is approximately 12 to 14 inches high, and it's springy. So the idea behind this is to get the players in the air higher, which will make them in the air longer than they would normally on an approach jump. By being in the air longer, we're going to allow them time to work on this very complex mechanical move of attacking. And the great thing also about the flat top Bosu ball, it's very stable when they use it to take off, kind of like a mini trampoline, and we can do a ton of repetitive jumping, and it's not going to trash their legs. And since they're going to be a little bit higher, they're going to be creating more force, and that's why we use this landing pad here. Just a gym mat or some kind of gymnastics mat is where I found this thing online. So go ahead. Good. So now as we come in, we're going to leave the ground, we're going to set up, and this time in the air we're going to try and create that reverse C position, and we're going to try and extend and snap our hip. We're not going to worry about the shoulder coming through. We're just going to take off, set up, extend, and then land and stick the landing. Great. One of the things that we're trying to do here is we're trying to get some positive tension through the torso of the player. So they're holding a 2-pound weighted ball here. And so because this 2-pound ball weighs 2 pounds, it's going to be hard for this thing to come through in this motion here. We're not swinging it yet, but what we're trying to do is leave the ground, load. They've got a 2-pound ball in their hand. We try and get in that power C position, which is heel slightly up in the air. And then we're going to snap and rotate, and as that happens, we create positive tension through the torso. And that tension, once it releases, is going to help the players hit with a tremendous amount of power. Good. So I'm really not looking for the shoulder to come through yet. It's going to come through. I just want it to come through last, kind of like the last 2 reps there. Nice. And we're going to land, knees out slightly. Good squat position on the landing. Good. Good squat position on the landing. Great. Now let's grab some of the light balls. All right, go ahead. The next step in our progression here now, we've taken out the heavy balls, and now we have some light balls. Could be tennis balls, could be anything light. And the player is going to step up on the Bosu ball. She's going to start out in that knee out position, and she's going to hit it like a mini tramp, which is going to propel her up in the air. And now she's working on getting in that power C position with her torso loaded. Going to try and extend her feet down at the same time her hips snap around, and then that's going to create the torso rotation, and then the arm's going to follow after that. So we've talked about it before, but there's a lot of moving parts in the mechanics of volleyball attacking, and when you add into it the variable of the set, is it high, is it low, is it off, is it tight, is it too fast, is it slower than I expected, you've got a tremendous amount of variation in all of the components that have to come together here. So the skill of attacking is very complex on a lot of levels. I'm asking my players here to use all the muscles in their body, their legs, their hips, their torso, and lastly their arm to help throw the ball. Synchronizing that move is very challenging. So putting them in a situation where they can repetitively do it without fatiguing and getting in the air a little bit higher than they normally would, gets them in the air a little bit longer, gives them the opportunity to try and experiment and sync these moves up. So we've talked about the takeoff position, we've talked about the load position, we've talked about the power C position. Now I'm going to ask my players to really emphasize the hip snap in the air and then just let the torso and arm follow that. There we go, very good. So in order to generate velocity, over time, we have to use the bigger muscles in our body to generate power. So these are the muscles in the legs, the hips, the torso. The muscles in the arm and shoulder are very small, relatively speaking, to the bigger muscles in the body. So we've got to teach players to engage these big muscles. And it's a very difficult thing to do for all the reasons that we talked about earlier. I have found that using this device and this sequence gives my players a lot of positive repetitions at using the bigger muscles to generate velocity and syncing them up correctly. Obviously, if I were to have my players do approach jumps this many times or hit sets or tosses this many times in a row, they'd be jumping about 6 inches off the ground because they'd be so fatigued. Another reason why I like this training device, because their legs are not getting fatigued during this, they're still getting up in the air, they're in the air longer than normal, and that's going to give them the chance to help synchronize this whole motion. As a coach, I think it's important to understand when you're dealing with skill mechanics, and this is any mechanic, especially, very good Jay, especially mechanics that involve a tremendous amount of muscle synchronizing or muscle activation. The human body will default towards what is most energy efficient. And obviously using all these muscles in this sequence is not very energy efficient. It's very mechanically efficient and very mechanically productive, but it's not what the body is going to naturally do. So we have to develop this skill, we have to train this skill, and we have to do it repetitively. That's how we can develop a positive skill pattern, what's called a motor engram. And since the body will default to what is most energy efficient, as coaches we are always fighting that tendency in the body. We've got to teach players what's most mechanically efficient, which is not always what's most energy efficient, and then develop the skill pattern. And the only way you can develop the skill pattern is by high quality repetition. All right, so what we've seen in when we look at high-speed film is that a lot of young hitters, and I'm talking about middle school, relax that, talking about middle school and talking about high school and even some college hitters, they have a tendency to lead the swing with their arm. And it's a hard thing to see unless you're looking at it in slow motion, but if Elizabeth were in the air and she were an arm swinger, what would happen is she might have good setup position, but instead of her hips going first or her torso rotating, her arm would actually go first, and the rest of her body would come right after her arm. And I think that this swing mechanic is very prevalent in club and high school volleyball, and it's because hitting is a very challenging skill on a lot of levels. Like we've talked about and seen, it requires a lot of muscles in synchronization to do it with power. But the thing is, we want to hit with control at the same time. So the easiest way to control something is to eliminate all the muscles that you're using, use fewer muscles, and that's why I think so many young players hit arm first. And what ends up happening is they hit arm first, they have control, and then in order to generate power, they use their arm muscles more to hit more powerfully. And what ends up happening is, I think, we put their shoulder in a very bad position, especially playing 3-day events, 5 or 6 or 7 times a year during the club season. So it's important that we develop the correct sequence of swing. And what we like to initiate the swing with is, like we talked about, being in that power C position and then hip going first, which creates positive tension through the torso. And then the torso is going to rotate, and it's also going to elevate her up to the ball as she goes to contact it. And it's creating that kind of position, that rotation and elevation with the torso, that's going to help involve the big muscles generating power, therefore letting the small muscles on the arm do more of the control of the shot, not depending on the smaller muscles to generate power. So let's do a few more off the Bosu ball throws here. So just continue. So now we're kind of at the end. We've keyed on the reverse C position. We've keyed on the hip turn. We've keyed on the setup. And now I'm just asking my players to go through the move here and try and sync it all up. Because part of the challenge in this complex skill is getting the synchronization right. That looked good, Jay. And still want a good takeoff position, want a good landing position at the end, and we want to get a good power C position in the air. Very good. And then a really good elevation and snap out with our hips, our legs, and then rotation and elevation with the torso. One of the things that we talk about a lot of times with our players is hitting tall. Go ahead. And when we hit tall at the moment of release, go ahead, we want their body and everything to be totally extended at the moment of release. They can have a slight tilt in their shoulders, which comes from their spine, but we don't want them bent over this way being small, and we don't want them bent over this way making themselves small. So we talk about staying tall as we rotate and elevate. Very good. And then they're going to land tall also with their torso. So their torso is going to stay up, and they're going to land in like this squatted position. Always focusing landing on 2 feet with players, and knees going slightly out, knees never coming in. Knees coming in is a knee injury waiting to happen. Great. So we've gone through this whole progression. And now we've got to take the players and try and get the actual mechanic happening live. So, Jay, you're going to go first, Jay. And what's going to happen is you're going to throw 2, and then you're going to step off after the second one, and you're going to hit 2 tosses off of me off ones, yeah? And it's not going to be a race. It's going to be hit it, stick the landing, stand up, and then go again. And we're going to try and just replicate the same stuff, okay? So here now we've been working on the mechanics and the synchronization of the skill, and I'm going to have my player do 2 moves and then step off right away, off the net. Now try and do the same skill. And again, off the net, and stick the landing. Good. And then Z, same thing. Eventually we have to take the players into more of a live kind of setting. And what I like to do to help the transfer happen is get it happen and do another one. I didn't like that last one. Get them doing it well off the training aids, and then come in and then try and create a couple live reps. Good. Now, Z, you're going to pass this. I'm going to catch it. I'm going to toss you a 2. Okay? Stick your landing, both feet. Again, ready? Better. Go ahead, Jay. So as soon as we add the element of the ball timing, a lot of the synchronization of the move then starts to go away. So this is why we have to add this element in here. So she's feeling what she's doing, and now good. She's going to try and create it. Stay tall. It's all right. Now she's going to try and create it off the toss. Good. Good. Step over pass. Again. Good. Let's do one more round. So we've talked this whole session about how complex proper attack mechanics are. And as soon as we add the variable of the ball in flight, the human body is going to have a tendency to eliminate some of these complex moves. And what we want to do is try and help the players use all these muscles. That's my fault, that's low. Use all these muscles in the mechanically best position, in the most powerful position. So they're using big muscles to swing so that we take strain out of their shoulder and arm. Ready? Good. Good. Let's do one more round. This will be it. So here they're getting the chance to do the skill exactly correct and then stepping right over with that feeling. I'm high. Straight, fresh in their mind. Let's do one more, right away. And then trying to replicate it. Good. Good. Keep it powerful, Z. Really quick, really powerful. Now, same thing here. Good. Let's do one more. Good. So I hope these ideas will help you with attack training your players. I think a couple points that are real important to understand is the more complex the move is, in other words, the more body parts you're using and the more synchronization it takes, the harder it's going to be for players to replicate that. So you will see the skill actually change and parts of their body stop moving in order to help be accurate with attacking in this instance. So that's partly why I think we see so many young players swing with their arm first, because they're trying to hit the ball with control. And since they learn to do that, naturally to hit the ball with more power, they're going to go to their arm first, because that's how they have control, and that skill has been ingrained in their brain. So it's hard. It's even harder then to use all the mechanics that we want to use to hit the ball hard and safely. So understanding that as a coach, I think it now makes more sense as to why you have to continually skill train your players, because they're never going to master it. I look at golfers in our society, and that professional sport seems to me to be the people who spend the most time training their swing. And the ball's sitting there, and they hit for hours on the range, then they go play and they go back and they hit for hours on the range if they're good. So many moving parts to the golf swing. You look at the volleyball swing, a lot of moving parts here as well. So it's going to be hard to sync it all up. It's going to be hard, especially when you have the variable of the set and the fact that the player wants to try and change shots. So my takeaway here is that it's going to take continually developing and honing this skill throughout a whole player's career. They're never going to have it and then keep it. And then I think the mechanics that we talked about today, having players leave the ground and getting into a loaded position similar to this, and then from this position using the big muscles to initiate the swing, which would be extension, rotation to get a positive stretch through the torso, and then rotation and elevation in the torso as they go up to contact the ball. If you can work on that with your players, I know they'll hit the ball harder, and I know they'll hit it and protect their shoulder.